Right. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. How you doing? Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. And we sprung ahead. So why do we do that? And why can't we just, back in the day, Richard Nixon stuck us on one-time thing to save gasoline, right? Instead of bouncing back and forth in the spring. Like spring ahead, fall behind, right? And the falling behind, that time, is the normal time. It's like justice. The springing ahead one makes us work harder. It's like good for the industrialists, not so much for us. Right? So, question is, what is time? Why was it invented? The caveman didn't have a watch. The Romans didn't have a watch. The Greeks did invent the sundial, and that's pretty good. That's how I tell time. I look around for a shadow and I see where it is. And my doing that, my grandma got me into that because I didn't have a watch or a clock, right? And the city we were in didn't have bells. New York City. When I lived in Europe, when I lived in France, when I lived in Ireland, when I lived in Ireland, I lived in Skibbereen, which is like a county seat. They had bells going off all the time, and even in Glendore, which was like a tweaker. Around here, all the tweakers live, and there's the holler tweakers, and then there's the reptile cockroach tweakers. Colonel Sanders is a version of that, and everyone who's coming into my little Garden of Eden are that, because I'm a businessman. It's all reality. What are you talking about? Love. What are you talking about? Taking care of other people. If they didn't, it's their fault. It's their fault that my bank redlined their area. They can't borrow any money. Their business collapsed. It's their fault. And, the more you go that way, it's not. That's what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. It wasn't that they were like having sex with donkeys all the time. Well, they were, but that really wasn't it. And it wasn't that God was pissed off at them. No. They got turned into salt by their own actions, by their own physical, physical outcome of what their lifestyle was, right? So, and pretty much everyone's lifestyle is that. Now, I want you to think, right? I know sometimes hard, but think if a newspaper only came out, or your favorite, social media that you have threads on, came out and said it only came on your phone every 100 years, right? Not like every 20 seconds, but every 100 years, it would have, breaking news, what do you think the breaking news was for 100 years? What would be the most important story? Ends of wars, beginnings of wars, landing on the moon. Would that be the big thing for the 100 years? Because, they landed on the moon, if you believe it. And I've known there have been people on the moon for a long time, because the moon is basically the Death Star. It has nothing to do with any, you look at all the other moons in the solar system around Jupiter, Mars, not Mars, well, Mars has them, but Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, they all have moons, and Jupiter has moons bigger than ours, Ios, and what's the other one? Anyway, those suckers are twirling and going around and doing their own thing. So our moon stays in one place, never changes. There's something very strange about that. The very strange thing about it is that it is a artificial satellite. Right? It was put there for a reason, right? To kind of turn planet Earth that bounce back and forth. If you're a geologist and you go take those little core samples, there's not going to be too much ice left to do that, but when they dig those little core samples up, they can tell what the atmosphere was like a million years ago. So there are lots of different ways through natural sciences, science of Gaia, to see what was going on, through Earth's many different phases. And pretty much Earth was either a frozen ice ball or a muddy swamp, right? This Goldilocks period that we have pretty much started with the moon being there. It was placed there to do certain things to our planet, so it would just nudge it right into the right position where not too hot, not too cold, just right. And that sucker could fly away, and if it did, ooh, baby, we'd have problems, right? So anyway, but I digress, which I so often do because I am a griot. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your sensei Al Bob, me, your griot, here to tell you stories. And here we are at 6 minutes and 17 seconds. And I want to thank all those 4 people who have put something in my PayPal since 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, right? Pretty much February, the month of my birth, and I've gotten some great presents, but nothing in PayPal. And come on, just somebody put $10 in, so I know it still works. I have a sense that it still does because, like, the last one was, I think in January sometime. So, thank you for you 4 people who have placed something in there. Most of you, of the 4 people who placed something in there, really, don't have the cash. You're not as, you're not like me living like a millionaire on $400. And one of the reasons I can is that when I got to Deep Green, I had money, so I put it in good shape. I did everything it needed to be the Garden of Eden. And I never lived here, really. I'd be here for a couple of weeks in the spring, a couple of weeks in the fall, a couple of weeks in the summer, a couple of weeks in the winter. And it was nice, right? Each season here is nice. Of the 360 days of the year here, maybe 40 of them you don't want to be here. But the other ones are livable, and the other 3/4 or 80%, it's really nice to be here. Even today, where it's like in the high 30s, low 40s, misting, it's still nice. Right? I slept in the morning, wrapped up in my electric blanket, keeping me nice and toasty like a hot dog in a bun. And so anyway, I set this place up. So I knew that one day I'd be old and couldn't move and couldn't really work. And I'd have very limited resources because, my parents, they were had to be millionaires. So they did everything, they should have really been present. Parents. They were okay parents. They weren't bad parents. I worked in social sciences for a good 60 years. So I saw what bad parenting really is. And it really isn't the parents' real fault. They just should have never been parents, right? But society kind of puts them into that situation, So the bottom line, the interesting thing, like my mom, right? When she was born the second, number 2, her older brother. But her older brother was like kind of useless. My mom was, a triple Capricorn. She ruled the fucking world. She really did. Wherever she was it, right? I don't have. No, I don't. I'm showing you pictures of her. I have a picture of her at 102 standing in front of her church, meaning the Catholic Church built her own church near where she lived in Florida. Right? She had that kind of juice. When I was, a boy between 10 and 16, maybe a little, 10 and 16. My mom went to Rome and had a mano a mano sit down with the Pope 3 times. Presidents don't even get that. That's kind of what juice my mom had. But when she married my dad, when they got into their 60s, they kind of, they were building their wealth and fortune in their business, blah blah blah, right? And they basically the kids they had were their slaves. You know, I mean, they paid them well, and so those kids, my brothers and sisters, all had a material high, upper middle class material life, but really had no freedom. Me, I never had anything to do with my family. And when I was 9, I got my first real paying job with Grandpa Straw. My mom walked me in and like, there's somebody's buying. I kept blowing stuff up in my parents' fancy schmancy um, apartment in the, Imperial House. And I kept, and they were all old farts. My parents were the youngest, right? And so this place was like a castle. I mean, it had, had maids and butlers and they had a place, they had a gold elevator, just like JP Morgan's. That was automatic. It was Otis automatic, but they still had a elevator operator that would push the button for you, so you didn't even have to push the button. And but that guy was there really to carry your packages from. There was a guy at the front at the desk, which was it was like a hotel. You came in there, got my mail. Oh yeah, we have some packages. They'd have a guy who would carry it to your elevator, push the button for you, so you didn't even push the button. And would come down. They would place those packages in there, or you could say, "Oh, just have them brought up." And so that guy, in about 15 minutes, once you got into your place, he would take the service elevator up and come in the back door in the kitchen. All the kitchens had back doors off the service elevator hallway, and in each of those apartments, especially anything above the 20th floor and above, each of those apartments had little rooms off that door for the maid or butler, right? Or your servant, right? And that's where my grandma slept, right? Me, I didn't. My sister, my older sister, she got her own bedroom. Then there was a guest bedroom that no one ever slept in. My parents' suite, and I slept on the couch because I was never there, right? Okay, that's cool. But you think I was never there. You think, a guest, I was the guest, no, couch for you. And the couch was the crappiest couch my parents could find because when it unfolded, there was this bar right in the middle of your back. No matter how you slept on it, that bar was going to, So, that's why I really had nothing to do with my parents. I grew up with my grandma until I was 7, went back to my folks, and my father tripped over me one day and said, "Who are you?" I don't know. You don't belong here. You average kid that would like, Me, I said, that's right. I don't belong here. And I don't know what your problem is, but I'm staying out of your way. So, from that point on, my dad's bird colonel, he just would scream orders, do this, do that. My brothers and sisters way older than me. I mean, when I was born, my oldest sister was already a teenager, right? Then my brother, he was like, I don't know, 10 when I was born. No, maybe 8, somewhere around that, between 8 and 10. And when I came back at 7, I lived in his room, and before my parents bought the big house, and my grandma had a house just down the street, so most of the time I was with her. But in that 2 years between 7 and 9, it was a strange family, and guy, he could have been really a dick, but he wasn't, right? This cheeky little monkey, he was really into models, and I played with him and broke them, and he was, and then he'd always show me what a model was, and the glories and beauty of making a model, and so it was always interesting, right? Um, and but and when I went into first grade, um, being the cheeky monkey I was, I annoyed this Nazi nun, and she was literally a Nazi. She was one of those of the rat line that the Vatican skipped out of Europe and brought them to places like Israel, and they brought people who incinerated Jews to Israel. Good idea. And sent him to Argentina. Don't cry for me, Argentina. And a good chunk of them came to America, England, Australia, Canada, and Mexico, and other parts of Brazil. Big chunk of Brazil were Nazis. That movie Boys from Brazil with Gregory Peck. Um, so that nun murdered me, crushed my esophagus and my voice box. That's why I talk a little strange. And broke up that little stirrup, so this ear doesn't hear. But what this ear does, it works like a Doppler radar, and also it picks up other frequencies, so I can hear people way far away, way far away. Right. I brought Donna Ann to Delphi, right, to see the Oracle in Greece, right, and we flew there, and we were on the Swedish Nickel, and we stayed in Athens. We went to all other kind of places, but our tour did not have us go to the Oracle. And it was also, if we went there, we weren't going to get the flight back, so we'd have to get ourselves back to Sweden or wherever else we were going to go from that point on. And that's kind of what we did. We didn't quite go back to Sweden. We stayed in Sweden, I don't know, a month or so, maybe even longer, with our friends. And we took trips on the Swedish government nickel a few times, but not like I did. I did that for a whole year, and I went all over the friggin' world on that. And so, and that has been my path. It's like, oh, look at this. I'll take, and people would say, you're taking advantage. Oh, you're a terrible person. Like some moron. It was like, give me a hard time for having my school bus here for the last 20 years, right? And he said, that's out of the covenant, blah, blah, blah. I said, the covenant didn't exist. I was the only guy here. Get lost. I said, listen, you bought the place from Larry, right? Oh, Larry died of black mold. You have black mold in that house? What? Yeah, he got black mold. All your kids, your wife, you. And that brings me back all the way around to the main thing of what is time, right? So why does that moron spend time, just like, because he wants my place. He wants me out of here. He doesn't want me here because it's going to become a real place for rich people to be. And he's not. I keep telling these folks, I live like a millionaire on $400 a month. And they go, they're making 300 grand a year and they're barely paying their bills, And me, I don't buy anything. I got so much crap. I don't need to buy anything more, right? So he wants me out, One reason, because why this place has stayed, a Garden of Eden for 18 years before the pandemic, is that I was, at least this neck of the woods is 30 miles in any direction to the closest Walmart's, right, shopping place where bourgeois rich people who aren't rich, they're just upper middle class, and they're one step away from losing everything. Maybe I lost everything. I don't have anything except this joint, and I bought it. I own it. The only thing it costs me to stay here is my taxes. And when I first started, my taxes were $18 a year. Now they're up about $106, right? So I get to stay here. My rent is $106 a year, right? And I have insurance and this and that, and those normal things. And that's why my disposable income is $400. The other part of and that's I have a what is known as a budget. So I have all this other stuff, my health, my this, my that, and stuff that I have to keep up with. That's the other half. That's like 300 something bucks. I budget, automatically. But the 400 is, food, gasoline, other stuff, right? That's my disposable income, $400. And that's basically what I live on, right? So when I say I live like a millionaire, so yeah, it drives the rich people nuts, right? And what has happened is that this whole area has been basically redlined, and people who had farms and things who were just hanging on by their fingernails in the last 2 years, they're gone. They've been pushed out, and by these corporations that have built all this stuff, ripped everything apart, built beautiful, looks great on the internet, and sold these lots, 1 acre lots on sides of mountains that have views of trees, kind of like what I got, and charge people $100,000 to be in this gated community. You got, and it's right along the lake, and every house comes with a place to put your boat, right? Little do they tell the folks that half the year the TVA drains the lake, and so their little place to put their boat is like really a place you put your boat in the mud. I mean, it's like, and the lot they got is on a hill like this, and it's on a road that has, on a side of the county that has no water in the ground. So they're not having any drinking water. They're not getting wells. They could drill to China. They're not getting water, right? And there's no electricity because the place had zip people. So instead of having three phase, it has a single phase low yield, meaning very low current, right? Amperage. So you start, they have, before they bought up everything on that side of the lake, there was about 600 homes on the lake, and that part of the coast, because there are all these like little, we're Stuart Mountains, there are all these little lakes everywhere, but they're all part of the big lake. That coastline was about 400 miles, right? And there were about somewhere between 300 and 700 homes, right? And most of those homes nobody lived in year round, right? Now this corporation has sold close to 5,000 lots, right? And they've destroyed all the roads around here are farm roads, little teeny, half of them dirt, and and they have gigantic big dump trucks bringing stone and so, and they have not fixed any of the roads. So they sold all these lots. So they're going to move in about 3,000 people that barely can support 600 families, 3,000 families, and this place can barely support 600 families. And the county will have to bring in the water, will have to bring in electricity, have to build new roads, probably cost, I don't know, anywhere between $400 and $500 million, maybe more. And what's interesting, there was a collective around here that was bugging the federal government about bringing in fiber, and so the federal government passes whoop-de-doo, everyone gets the internet law, and it hasn't really showed up yet, but it is being brought to the rich people first, and the poor people, like when I call them, so it's a line near me. Oh yeah, it's gonna be right there. Can I get it? Oh, sure you can. What's do I am so far below. I am 1,000% below poverty level, right? And I live like a millionaire on $400. So I said to the social service people, so what's it gonna cost? Well, we're not doing it. Call here's your number. Here's what the federal government says you are, and you definitely fit in assistance. So I get no assistance, right? But I definitely fit in the assistance line, right? So I mean, other people lie, and their assistance is way up here. This one guy came. He's one of Colonel Sanders' slaves, and Colonel Sanders brought him down to get food stamps and assistance, and basically he gets 1,000 times more, and Colonel Sanders takes it from him, right? And so that is, what is time about? So Colonel Sanders and I saw him this morning with one of his slaves. I said, "Oh, did you guys go to church?" "Oh, well, the clock changed and we got up late, and so we didn't go. But we read the Bible." And I said, "Oh, what'd you read?" And about God has all the time, right? And I said, "So did you ever read the Old Testament?" "Oh yeah, I love the Old Testament." "What's your favorite?" "Oh, I don't know. In the beginning." I said, "Okay, yeah, okay. So did you ever read about Esther and Malachi?" "Huh?" Esther's person who basically created the Hebrew nation. Huh? Malachi was her basically slave owner slash teacher, basically Jesus Christ. Huh? Meaning Jesus doesn't just show up in the New Testament; he shows up all over the place. Because in the beginning, that's where Jesus was, right? The Son, Holy Spirit, us. We're the Holy Spirit. We are the reflection of the burning bush. Is work in progress. Huh? And so, well, gotta go. I said, but you're a Christian. This is fellowship. This is what Jesus said. When more than two come together, there I am. Don't you want to see Jesus around? I gotta go. Where you gonna go? Oh, I have to go buy some cigarettes and then some alcohol and then, well, okay. Mm. So what is time, right? Time is the utilization of your experience in this avatar, this mud puppet, to elevate your understanding of our place in consciousness, right? Our relationship with a great creator, right? And all of those who serve in love's co-creation. That's what time's about, right? Not about stuff, not about anything, right? So here I am, and I've had this great little Garden of Eden for 20 years, and I've had it for 18 years, really living in heaven. And in that time, I probably spent those 18 years, I probably spent, generously saying, 3 years here, right? The rest of the time I was doing, 10 of those 18 years, I was in the living the hedonist, corporate lifestyle. And the other times I was, being enamored with knowing things by being a itinerant scholar and bumping into all kinds of amazing things, like this, living. I lived in Asheville for 10 years. I went there. I was sent there to do ethnography on the Biltmore House. And that took about a year, and that was extraordinary. And that's why the Biltmore House is what it is. Me, this woman who is an archivalist, and two other people who were, one was an architect, and the other was a fashion, she understood style, right? And so she understood, and her whole thing was actually the Biltmore House. So she knew every piece of furniture, every piece of molding, you name it. So we documented all that. And because the federal government and state government was going to take that building from the moron who had it and put it back into what it was and use that as the anchor for building Asheville back into what it had been, which was a cultural center. In the 20s, it was the Paris of the South. So it was unbelievable. And, here's me in Asheville in 91, right? When I was almost 50. I was 49 that picture. 91, right? Not bad for 49, right? And there's my truck that that one of the farmers in up there in above Ithaca in the Finger Lakes. I was a farmer electrician. I saved about 5 farms from going under because the utility company put in high voltage and never grounded it right. So their milking machines were shooting high voltage, shocks up the cow's tits. So a few times of that, the cows did not want to get near those machines. And so, and if they didn't get milk, they died, right? And so, so that's my truck that I drove from up there in the Finger Lakes area. And it was a real beater, but it was a contractor. It had all the boxes, And here's the art. So there was UNCA, and that 10 years I was there, the kids that were there, that went through there, were amazing because a guy named Moog, Bob Moog, who invented electronic music, he retired, started business up there, and because Moog that he started was taken away from him, lawyers and such just took it away from him, right? But he still had his name. He couldn't use it in a corporation. he couldn't use it, but he still was Bob Moog. So he went up to that school, got a job doing the music department. So a bunch of amazing kids wanted to study with him. And then there was a guy, I forget his name, uh, but I knew him in New York, and he had been part of, I was part of the new the artist guild in New York, which was pretty famous. There were a lot of great, artists that started that thing in the 1890s and earlier. Cooper Union, Mrs. Cooper Union, Cooper, um, or Union, I forget which one, but one of those names invented a little gizmo that made steam the energy of industry, which it still is. Steam is what is behind all of our industry, not nuclear power. Nuclear power is just basically a fancy way of making steam, or not a fancy, a stupid way of making steam. Let's say that. And it's not too cheap to meter. It's like the most expensive, but it's too cheap. I mean, the bankers said that because they got the federal government to pay for it. That's why it was too cheap to meter. And so all of these things, what is the singular reference of all of this is time, right? And people don't know what time's worth, right? So 100 years ago, like I said, about maybe 30 minutes ago, I asked a question of you guys, and no one has answered it. There's only one of you watching, and there's one thumbs up. Thank you. Good morning, good evening, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland to all of you folks. Come and watch. We're talking about time. So if there was a newspaper that came out every 100 years, what would be their banner headline, right? A man lands on moon. We've gone from first being able to fly in the air to landing on the moon in 60 years. What would be the big, end of war? No, but that hasn't happened. So what would be it, right? The average life expectancy of a singular human being for most of recorded history was 30 years old, right? And 100 years ago, 1920, the average age was 20, because they just had the big Spanish flu, but it shouldn't have been called that. And they only called it that because all the rest of the world was fighting World War I, and that took up the headlines. Spain was neutral, so they could talk about it, and they noticed, oh, look at this flu, this pandemic thing. What's going on here? In 1 year, 60 million people died. There was only 2 billion people. That was, a nice chunk of the population right there. And about a third of the people who died in World War I were soldiers in the trenches dying of this influenza. And this influenza is still with us. They call it Spanish flu. But every year we have, 1 million people in the world die of influenza in the influenza season, give or take. And that's the same influenza, right? So COVID-19 is going to be with us. The interesting thing about COVID, not so much that it kills a lot of people, is that it mutates. It's a virus that mutates faster than really historical reference, right? Which makes you think that it could be man-made. That if it mutates that much, there's a question mark about it. So anyway, the real headline would be what our expectancy of life was before the pandemic. And that is the average world, all of humanity, average is 70 years old, right? And so that's pretty amazing. How did we go from 30 to 70? How did we get that 50 years or so? And in less than 100 years. And it's not one big thing, it's a whole bunch of things, right? I would say, what would you think the major thing that makes humanity live longer, right? It's a whole bunch of things, right? Not just one. The big major one, the toilet. The thing that kept, that spread disease around was that people would just shit in a bucket and throw it out the window, right? I lived in places that they did that, right? It's shit right on the street, right? I mean, today, everybody, oh my God, he dropped his pants. Oh, I'm a king. You know. I remember the first time my dad took me into the city on his business trip. He said, you know, when you can't take a piss and there's no place to go in and use the toilet, this is what you do. And he looked around. It was an alley. We walked the end of the alley. He said, you find a place where no one can see you. You just drop your zipper to bring out your hog and water the sidewalk. Anyway, the toilet, the Johnny toilet, John's toilet. They call it the John for a reason. And it's the Johnny toilet, right? You know, it's the place where you eliminate out through the Johnny hole of your body, right? And that brown goo comes out, right? And back in the day, the Greeks could tell what's, you know, I read palms. The Greeks would watch your stool, you know. And the French had these great toilets, not just a bidet that like washes your Johnny hole, but basically your turd, your Johnny turd falls on a little stage, so you can observe your turd without water around it. Right? You can see if it's gooey, if it's strong, what color it is, what its smell is, all the above. Right? So, and you should ask John Boy why the toilet is named a John, right? And why your anus is called the Johnny hole or the Johnny cake, right? And that's the turd, the Johnny cake. Ask John why that is. You know, go email him. You know, when he goes on his YouTube, and there's a place of comment. Ask John. John, why is shit called Johnny cake? John, you know, why is your anus called a? Ask him. Anyway, let's see. Where were we going? Yes, time. So now humanity, you know, back there 100 years ago, our population was around 2 billion, give or take. And why did my mother's parents have 11 kids? Because on the average, 8 of them would die, right? Before they were 2, right? In my family, my parents, 3 of our kids died, and I was almost one of them. So was my oldest sister, right? The other ones in the middle had the demographics where they were a little healthier than we were. But yeah, and my oldest sister, you know, she's getting close to 90. So and she's doing pretty good. And she's got a bunch of kids. She had 6, I think, or 5, and they all had 4 or 5. And so she's got a big circus. Yeah, that's what, and everything revolves around her. That's how she set it up, which is, you know, she's quite the circus. And it's, you know, it's the familia, you know, very Italian familia, right? And so, so anyway, but in America, life expectancy was going down before the pandemic even hit. And that's because the basic experience of the average human was what, you know, Colonel Sanders and you know, Mr. I'm a professional, you know, Mr. Businessman, you know, Mr. You know, when I get going because I live in the real world, Mr. Real World. I guess that's what we'll call him, Mr. Real World, right? But he has totally lost any essence. I mean, he's got this really beautiful place here. He's had it for maybe 4 or 5 years. He was one of the other guys. You know, there's 30 lots. There's only 4 houses, right? And he was one of those. He bought it because it was built by the developer. Built 4 houses and sold them, right? Just to show people, look, you can have a house here, right? Instead of just having empty lots. So people actually paid a nice chunk of change for these things back in 19, you know, 70 whatever, right? And then they realized they couldn't build anything here, be like 20 times what they paid for it because their property is on a mountain like this. So, building so all these houses, except for two of them, well, three of them that are on a spot, but their driveways are still like the guy up there. Unless you park your driveway on the backside of where the house is, when it sleets, even if your car is like, you know, there and you got the parking brake on, if it's on any part of the hill, that sleet, the car will just start going down. And once it hits this part of the driveway, whee! It's like a ski jump. Even though those wheels aren't turning, they are flying down that hill, smashing through the trees, going across the road, flying into down below. And a couple of, and that's happened 4 times. You'd think they'd figure that out. And the other big house up there, all the roads that got paved that have anything like that, they have potholes the size of semi trucks because once that water is going down a flat, smooth surface like blacktop, it's going fast. And this place used to be a rain, so we would get these gully washers. They get 2 or 3 inches of rain in an hour. That's like that much rain across the whole friggin' road, going 90 miles an hour down a hill. So there's a little like crack in the asphalt or a little hole in it. The water is flying 90 miles down, and then it hits that little thing, kind of goes in there. So they're gigantic, like I said, size of tractor trailers. It just gets bigger and bigger. And so I call it the death road. So I don't go on that. I go at this dirt road, and then I hit this other road, and then I hit the county road. So I drive an extra 3/4 of a mile. It's safer for my car. But now all these people coming in, they want to fix that road, and that's going to cost 50 grand. So you have to what's 30 into 50? That's like 1,500, 2,500 bucks. I said, no, I don't have to do that. What do you mean? We're the compact. I said, I don't agree to the compact, right? And the guy says, there's one, but it says here that one person can say, can make you do anything. I said, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm that one person, and I say no to all of this. And he went, you're a bad person. Well, what will happen is someone will offer me some money to get out of here, and I will do it. And I'll make a deal where I'll stay here for whatever amount of time it takes me to get out of here, and that'll be that, right? And I'll clean the place up so it doesn't look. And I left this place looking like a holler place, in like a testimony to the holler folk who were being destroyed, and to give a tip of the hat to whoever wanted to rob this place. It's nothing to rob. Oh, that's our place. So that's always got his like books and underwear and socks and toothpicks, and there's nothing. He's got no flat screen TV. He's got no nothing, right? So, and they know because when they were kids, they used to help me, build things and clear things because I was trying to teach them a trade so they could get the frack out of here and not be screwed by this system. Which screwing because all of the schools that were around here that were really pretty good, little red schoolhouses that really had a great, well, the county, because somebody lost lots of money, I'd like to know who got that cash. So they don't have the cash to do it like they used to. So they're going to move everyone. There's a big high school, and there's 2 big high schools, a big middle school, and a bunch of pretty big grammar schools. So they're going to move all the kids of kindergarten to 6th grade into this big, thing. So instead of having classes of 10 and 15 a teacher, they are going to have classes of 60. Right? And then instead of having 4 middle schools and these other small schools having kids from 6th to 8th grade, they're going to move them all into one of these big schools. So they're going to have, instead of 10 or 15 kids to a class, they're going to have 60 kids to a class. And there's going to be one Jumunga High School, which is right next to the jail. So pretty much those kids don't know where they're going, right? And they're going to be given the choice, go to jail or join the army. Die for Wall Street or just fucking die, right? And so my beautiful little Garden of Eden counties, the 3 counties that when I got here, it was like unbelievably gorgeous and people, community, and we have the highest level of OxyContin death in the last 10 years per capita than anywhere in the world. It killed a third of the population. We have one, um, corporate pharmacy that was selling 1 million prescriptions a month for 10 years. The more than it, like a place that has a population of 3,000. So I just, this is what's going on. So that's what time does. It gives you perspective. If you, like me, living here, just watching it. So I'm out in the middle of the woods. How do I know the perspective of wars? And, so, when I started talking about the big splat 3 or 4 years ago, and what did I say? There were going to be some pretty big wars. Forget what was going the Middle East. They've already accomplished what they wanted, destroy it, right? Turn it into, just blow it up, which they did very, very nicely. Libya, they wanted to, um, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan in a certain way, but not really. But not so much Saudi Arabia, but all the AU guys, or EA guys, or whoever those guys are, the little Saudi Arabias, they were all working towards selling their oil in the golden dinar, right? If they did that, that would have really upset the petro-American dollar. And that's why we had that war, right? So I was talking about that 4 or 5 years ago. Still no one's talking about, why did we invade Libya? Come on. To free the Libyan people? No. Muammar had it down. Everyone there had a house, had a job, had as much education as they wanted, could do anything they wanted to do. Their banking would give them whatever money. They were making more money because what Muammar was really smart at was, instead of just letting the European companies come in and take his oil, he developed his own technology to drill, and not just drill it, and not just have pipelines that take it to the port, but to turn it into products, right? So, and that's why on the oil, there's a thing called benchmark Libyan crude, because that's the benchmark. Here's this country that sells its oil as a product. All the different types of esters and all the different types of oil, gasoline, jet fuel, what you name it. That is that Libyan benchmark, right? That's why everything's pegged on that, right? Because he was producing it, selling it to the market lower than the Europeans, and better quality, lower quality. So he was getting gold for it, right? But the thing he developed this technology of drilling, and then he realized that underneath all that desert was a lot of water. So he drilled down deep. I mean, really deep, like 4,000 feet deep, to where there's this equatorial water, unbelievable water. That's where our weather comes from. Not from the water doesn't come from the sky; it comes from the earth. And so, anyway, and that's why when big floods happen, that's kind of what happens. There's a disturbance, and why California is having a sky river is because this water, for certain you know, reasons that they aren't discussing, is causing more water to come from deep into the ocean, into the air, into the sky, and laying it down right there, right? So that's why this is happening. And this is the things, the big flood that the Old Testament goes on about. And they've been lots of big floods before, not just Noah, right? And so this is all time. It's about time, it's about space, it's about being lost in space. That's what we are. We're lost in space, right? Like the Jupiter one. So that's why I talk to the idea of you, the individual artist in the first person. That's what we are. That's what this little avatar, our art is us, not in an egocentric way, but within the construct of all our relations, how we fit in with everything. When we figure that out, that's when heaven on earth is coming here. And Jesus never left. If Jesus left, he's always been here from back in the day. And in the beginning, it was all dark, and then it was light. And what was that spark? It was bang, Lucifer showing up. The illuminated one. What does Lucifer mean? The illuminated one, right? The Illuminati, all of that. Those guys, ooh-wee, right? If you go into the mystery schools, right? And basically, Lucifer and Jesus are like twins, just opposites, right? And that is the real problem, is the opposition of the discretion of separation, right? And when those two guys come together, and they're very close, they're very tight, but and the thing that will bring those two entities together is we, the individual, and because that's what we were sent here to do. That's why we have a free will. That's why we experience this existence in this avatar of a body, which is like a prison cell. So it is, we are in a prison cell in the Garden of Eden, right? And wherever I go, I'm always in the Garden of Eden, right? Even when I'm in, countries that are in the middle of civil wars and in cities that are, strife with crime and violence and environmental corruption, it's still the Garden of Eden. And I work on bringing forth. So that's why, so when I went to Asheville and I was just that singular guy, right? That, I went there and there was nothing going on. It was like stuck in amber. And I met these kids at UNCA because I was doing a study through that place. And they were just amazing kids, right? And so I said, I met this couple guys and they had a student thing. I said, why don't we do a club? Because, I was at the school and I said, Al, we need somebody to be the advisor. But they already kind of had that adjunct guy, but they needed another guy to take all the lady who is the anthropologist was my friend, David Hopes, who was the literary guy. I forget the guy who was the artist guy and the science guy, and that guy was straight up DARPA, Dr. Strangelove was in that school, and that's why the science department is now the biggest department there is. They had a theater department anyway, so I was there. So I just kind of was the dude there and kind of said, "Oh, let's go do this. Let's go do this." And I just kind of put the ideas in their little heads, and they went off and did it. And whenever they didn't know how to do something, so I said, so this girl here, her daddy was a real estate guy from Charlotte, and he bought up tons of property. Oh, he was a smart guy. He realized that. Why are you doing that? That place is just a shithole, right? Like me, I could have bought lots of, because I was working for an electrical contractor who came from Florida. His mommy was, very similar to Colonel Sanders here. He has no money. His mommy has all the money. No idea where she gets her money, but that's another story. And so she's buying up everything. He's finding it, and she's buying it, right? And this guy, and in North Carolina, if you had an electrical, and I had a master's license in New York, I could have gotten an electrical license in Asheville, no problem. But I didn't want to. I was doing this other stuff. I didn't want to run an electric business. I already did that, done that, right? But I still like being an electrician. So there was a really good electric supply house. I kind of went there, ate the popcorn. Every supply house always has popcorn and good coffee, and a bench, and where everyone, the guys who go get you your stuff is on one side of the bench. You sit on the other on these chairs and drink coffee and eat popcorn and talk to each other. I just hang out there, and when I found somebody interesting, I said, "Oh, you need a hand?" So this guy, young guy, and his mommy bought a lot of big buildings that had elevators, and pumps to take the water up 20 stories, and these buildings were built in the 20s, right? And she got them for nothing, right? She got them for like $110,000, So she bought up a ton of stuff, just like now, you know, Colonel Sanders here. They're not, they're buying crap to begin with, and very limited crap. There's a real low level of support here. There's the environment. I mean, the trees here, just 2 years of the scum living here, and it's not even that much scum. There's only three scummies here, right? That you hear yummies or gummies. These are scummies, right? And there's only three scummies here, and I guess I'd be a gummy. So, how much time we got left? Oh, we got a good deal. We got a good hour left. Anyway, and we haven't even done an hour yet. It's 56 minutes and 6 seconds. I love it when that happens. So, time is relative. It's what you do with it that counts, right? And the most important thing you do with it is love. And that's why Colonel Sanders, he does have elements of love in him, right? And even, Mr. Professional, Mr. Businessman, he has elements of that, but both are so full of fear, and it's unbelievable, right? And they got guns, and they're going to kill anyone who goes up against them. And me, I'm just me. And Mr. Professional, he's Colonel Sanders has realized, no, Al has, everything that comes out of his mouth, it's I know it should be. I could, if I only could, understand or listen or take the time to slow down, I might learn something. And he's kind of got that. And he comes every now and then, but he drinks so much. People distract themselves with their bad habits. Now, I understand this. I did it for 10 years. Living in the swimming pool, the chocolate mousse of corporate excess. I understand. I experienced it. Right? And people go, "Well, don't you? Is there anything you wish you didn't do?" No. It's not a thing that because I learn from when you learn from every experience you have. There you go. Talking about that, let us talk to a martyred artist. Oops, wrong phone. Boop, 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 boop. Do, do, do. Let's see if our boy. He called up earlier. Do 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 do. Boo boo. Oh, there's two of you watching. 2 thumbs up. Thanks, guys. How about getting some more people watching? Hey, homie. I just realized you were the guy who rang early this morning. I was asleep in my warm cocoon, and I just heard a little jingling of my phone at the other end. And that's why I keep my phone at the other end so I can't get at it. And I just turned over and went back to sleep. And I got up hours later, because that's what you do on a rainy day. You enjoy sleeping, right? And that's the end of the message. Anyway, you can call me again, and maybe it'll ring, and maybe it won't. I'm calling you now. It is. Oh, there he is. Is that you?
Hi.
Here he is.
Do you like Twix bars?
What was that?
Do you like Twix bars?
What is that?
Twix.
Twix
Candy
are,
bar.
Twix are for kids.
No, that's Trix are for kids. Or for hookers.
Why would hookers like children's cereal?
Don't stick your dick in the cereal.
I never
Stick your dick
have.
in a hooker.
Well, you know,
Do you like Twix bars?
I don't know what it is. Explain to me what it is.
Well, ask your friends and then you let me know later. That's your mission. I'm giving you a mission. Find out what a Trix bar is. Try it.
Oh, a Trix
Report
bar.
back.
You mean like a candy bar?
Twix. Twix.
Yeah, it's a candy bar, right?
Do you like Twix bars?
No.
Yes, it's a candy bar.
No.
Well, how could you know? You never had one.
Oh, I've had them before.
Oh, all right. So then why are you lying to me?
I'm not lying. I didn't understand what you're saying.
Why wouldn't you understand? I speak English. You understand English.
Well, I thought it was Twix for kids.
Oh, well.
I
didn't think you were into kids. You're
misunderstood.
not a priest, are you?
I misunderstood.
Oh, okay. It
So
was a
I'm
mistake.
talking on the show right now about
Oh
time.
my goodness.
About
All
time.
right. Well,
Time.
hopefully you didn't get any
Time-
strikes for
time
advertising the Twix.
Time is the subject.
Time is the subject.
Mhm.
Okay.
So in your life reference, how would you experience or talk about time with what you've done with it so far? The time allotted you so far, what have you done with it, and what do you think about it?
On one level, you could say I wasted a lot of it,
What level is
but I
that?
think that's illusory.
Right.
I think that's illusionary.
And that's
But
because why is it illusory? Is it because other people
why
are
is it
judging
illusionary? Because I think that
It's
a couple
coming.
of levels.
Okay. What is that?
As long as you're engaged, this is kind of my outlook.
Uh-huh.
If you are engaged in activity, creativity, whatever it is, movements, whatever, that is not a waste of time. It might not have outcomes that were necessarily desirable, or it may not have achieved expectations or goals that may have been assigned to the activity. But so with that sort of premise, I've wasted no time.
Okay. So all of your utilization of drugs and alcohol and other things within that cultural moray that society would judge as a waste of time, how would you not balance, but
It's up to you to think it's a waste of time. That's
right.
how I balance it.
Okay, you're right. So go into explain that.
Okay. Like I just gave you the premise. As long as it's an activity, it's not a waste of time.
Okay, so as long as you're doing something. So someone
So,
like
I mean, for me
so
personally,
you look at
to answer the societal question, it's more
a judgment.
it's more since I identify as a person of recovery, the societal narrative would say, or uninitiated, which is both. Listen. Okay, sorry about that. They would say, "Oh well, he was a naughty guy and he wasted time.
Mm-hmm.
He wasted quote unquote potential." These views do not serve me, because if I cave into that, or if I believe that, then why not just give up? So it doesn't serve. So that's why I kind of say, fuck that. That's your problem if you believe that. But to the initiated, all human beings, regardless of the strata, unless they're just willfully evil motherfuckers, I will make that exemption.
What is it?
are
Willful.
seeking healing, wholeness, and homeostasis in some way.
Right. Okay.
And it may appear on the outside to be meaningless, pointless, destructive, or if it jives to what your opinion is or what society or whatever, it may not.
Right.
I
Society,
choose
if
to,
you're
to
killing
view
yourself
those
to be a
years in my
millionaire
life
and just buy shit.
as a spiritual journey that
Yes.
was necessary to bring about an awakening.
Yes. Okay.
was-
Good. Yeah.
But that's the narrative that is most comfortable and suits me and is least harmful and more beneficial and allows me to thrive. So time and perception are linked. Those are sort of some examples of that. Now, where I'm currently in my perception and understanding of time in terms of my personal and spiritual growth, well, it's the same thing, really. I kind of I was introduced to the concept of memento morte. If I'm probably not saying it right, somebody in the peanut gallery will correct me, hopefully. But the concept is basically there is an ending, a physical ending to the being, right? The body dies. You know, however
That's
many
just the body.
years you're allotted or whatever. So in knowing that there is a finite, it's actually kind of positive in a way because you kind of realize you need to quote unquote be productive with your time, but on the spiritual plane, the productivity is growth, kindness, you know, all the good stuff, all the stuff that's not acceptable on the material realm. And so I just concentrate on where was my spiritual growth today? Did I tell the people that I really care about exactly what I need to share with them? Because time is finite. But then in recognizing that there is a limit, I accept a limit until it's no longer a limit and becomes a gift or a guide or a process.
Can you outline some of those limits?
Okay, well, like I just said, the physical body has its limits. There's, you know, we die, human beings, so that's one limit.
That's only the limited of the experience of the physical realm.
That's correct, but it's a limit nonetheless. Other limits, my favorite example, I love the Ramones. Hopefully people in the peanut gallery will appreciate what I'm about to say. And if they don't, oh well. I can tell them to call their mom. But be careful, if you call your mom, I might be the one who answers the phone. So anyway, the Ramones, in terms of musicianship at the time of their, you know, creation, forming of the group, 1976, thereabouts. Rock and roll, there was an expectation at that time that you had to be a virtuoso musician, you know, or at least that was a popular conception. Not so much now. It's kind of, you know, the Ramones were one of many groups that kind of blew that apart, which was fantastic. So they just stayed within the confines of their so-called limited musicianship until the limit was no longer a limit, and that was the Ramones. They were just the Ramones. So their personal limits. Actually, I was directed to read the book A Wrinkle in Time, which is a sci-fi book. It's a children's book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lazy, so I watched the movie. And, even though Oprah Winfrey was in it, she was behaved enough for me not to, you know, vomit. But one of the main themes in that film is to embrace your limits, and that your limits are actually your superpower. They're actually your gifts. And I embrace my, you know, limits in terms of their societal stuff. I can't necessarily partake in all the reindeer games that society offers due to lack of formal education, high school diploma only, some background as a technician, but that's about it. So on paper, I'm not going to be lecturing at Fordham or something like that.
There are a lot of
due to that
people.
constraint.
There are a lot
But
of people who
who
lecture at
needs
Fordham
who needs Fordham?
who have those. They don't have the credentials, but they've done amazing things. So
Oh,
they
absolutely.
come and
That's
lecture at
again,
Fordham.
you accept the limit until it's no longer a limit. I've listened to very scholarly dissertations in church basements.
Right.
With stale donuts and shitty coffee.
Yep.
And I would just as much gotten from that as a Joel Osteen or who was that guy? He passed away. He wrote that book, The Erroneous Zones, I think it was called. Wayne Dyer.
Yep.
Wisdom can be gathered anywhere.
Right.
Again, so that's kind of been my catchphrase: accept the limits until they are no longer limits.
Why accept them? Why not see them but not accept them?
Well, I mean, I guess we need some clarification of the usage of the word acceptance.
Right.
If change is to happen, one must accept the circumstances as to where they are.
Okay.
Whether it's internal or external or whatever it may be.
That's a better clarification. Yep.
I'm offering it because I understand that.
Yep.
Because sometimes people will just specifically, because society is so goddamn brainwashed.
Yep.
We take on acceptance as, oh, this sucks. It's just always going to be like that's resignation. That's like, you're kind of throwing any possibilities of opportunity away.
Yep.
It's a very pessimistic outlook. And that's an easy trap. So I'm glad you asked me to clarify that. I have no hesitation to clarify that. So, yeah. So accept, again, I love the Ramones. Great example, at least in my view.
Where would you put the Velvet Underground?
Velvet Underground as well. Same thing.
Yeah, but those guys were not. I mean, John Cale.
Well, John Cale was at formal training, but he basically, I mean, even formal training can that not be perceived as a limit?
Oh yes, much so. Especially if you get stuck in the academia rather than the scholarly.
Yeah.
And even scholarly, it's harder to pigeonhole yourself as within the scholarly, but you still can, So.
Well, what does scholarship mean? I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean a degree.
No, scholarship actually in Latin it breaks down understanding by experience. That's what scholarship means in Latin.
Correct. In the spiritual realm, we call that gnosis.
Yeah.
It leads to great revelations that can change a person's life.
Yep, pretty much all the great revolutionary thinkers got there from that rather than looking at a textbook.
Yeah, or a bit of both. Hopefully, I think a bit of both is a good combination.
Well, back in the day,
or taking what you've read and make it alive,
right? And
by observation and
from
application in one's life,
from personal experience and experience of a teacher, and that's the difference. A teacher is, someone who imparts an experience to the student rather than saying turn to page 32.
Correct.
Right. So, and that's where we are. We're at a very interesting crossroads in times because of technology and things going on in society. We are really at a crossroads where we could become amazing as a species, or we can throw ourselves down the rabbit hole for another 900 years of dark ages. But we're not. This ain't end of times. I love it when people. Oh, the end of times coming. It's so bad right now. Jesus is coming soon. No, sorry, Jesus is already here. Never left the building.
Correct.
Because if he did, we'd be toast. So. That's a fallacy.
Yeah, Christ consciousness is amongst us always.
Always, right. So it's like
it was even a year before
we showed up. Yes, exactly. Yeah. When things were all dark, he was here, right?
Always.
Yep. So
always.
And if you read, I didn't go to, I don't often.
I was trying to go to a Bible study, but they were closed.
Right. It was rainy, and I just stayed in bed.
Oh, really? I had a good breakfast.
Right. And I, the day before, yesterday, I guess it was Thursday, the pastor, the guy who really runs everything, um, and the head of the school system came and got me and took me out to dinner and said, everything you were talking about the last 10 years is happening. We thought but it's, what's happening is like this whole area is being redlined, and the school system, which is really pretty interesting and good, the powers that be are crushing it. And instead of having all these little red schoolhouses where the kids are being taught by a good teacher, and there's 10 kids in a thing, they're closing three-quarters of all those down and squishing them into a big building like a prison, and they'll have 60 kids.
Yeah, you told me that the last time we spoke.
Right, but I'm telling you, and
well, you're telling the guests, I apologize. I forgot it was on the show.
Right. So anyway, that was my Bible study, because these guys are all about being Mr. Churchy, and they're going, and I was talking about the girl who started the Jewish tribes, Esther, and Melchizedek, her teacher and owner, and the king of the guys who were the people who got turned into salt. That guy. Anyway, she, God came to her and said, "Hey, this is what's needed." And again, right at this crossroads, and Melchizedek, her basically owner, but really her teacher, and he said, "You have to follow what the Lord tells you." And he's not coming from that neck of the woods, but he's a scholar, so he knows it. And what's really interesting when you look at what he says, he is portending Jesus' arrival. And so this is like in the very beginning of the Old Testament. And here is a woman who is setting up the Hebrew nation. And the Hebrew nation doesn't really give her that much of they talk about Moses all the time, but they don't talk about her.
Well, there's a lot of productivity at that time, especially that was the origins of the Hebrew national hot dogs. But Nathan hot dogs are better. So sorry, Jew.
But yes, so we're at that similar hot dog stage in cultural, social, and human development. And so we can either go down the Nathan's path, or the other hot dog path. That's really, which would just be a continuation of the same old same. And that's the interesting point. And that's the point I said, so guys, you got a real choice here. You can just bend over, or you can really pick up your britches and live all that Christian stuff that you talk about every Sunday and every Wednesday, right? When I come to Bible class, all that stuff you talk about, you can stop just reading it, and you can start living it. You start living it, you can change this around, and it'll be amazing, because you'll be able to change this whole little community not back to what it was, and be, what is that when you think about the good old days, happy days? What do they call that? When you're thinking about, things were better in the old days. What do they call that? Nostalgia. Instead of being nostalgic, you can move forward in a more positive way and embrace what you say is your faith. And they were like, I said, it's going to be a little difficult. You keep constantly talking about how Christians will be, yelled at and thrown to the lions. Well, the corporate will go after you. All these big corporations that are buying everything up here and turning it into a piece of crap and killing your kids. They basically said to the kids, your only choice is jail or die in the army. We're going to have more wars, and you're going to be the cannon fodder. That's your choice: jail or go into the army. And I said, so you guys are in charge here. You're the deciders. I'll give you a hand. I'll help you out, but you gotta choose. So I left them Thursday with that kind of look. I made it real clear what path I said, just everything in the Bible you've been reading about that I've been there for the last year. You got to start living that rather than just reading it in the Bible. And so You got to go back to your churches and you got to say, okay, people, are we ready to fight for our children and our way of life? And do you want to make it better?
I even go further than that. I wouldn't necessarily fight for your children, which I get the sentiment. You know, I'm not being contrarian. I'm just trying to add more of a depth to it in terms of the Christian piece. If you have supposedly surrendered your will and your life to the principles of what Jesus taught, then it's kind of what you're supposed to do.
I see. This is a great opportunity, guys.
It's not even a
catastrophe.
And however, like you had pointed out, like many of us on any spiritual path, we get complacent. That's part of the human condition. It's not a judgment. It's an observation. Within myself and just throughout time.
Pretty much everybody.
And then there's these moments where it's kind of like, okay, well, put your money where your mouth is.
Yep.
Let's do this.
Yep.
You know? And I think a lot of times, I'll just keep it on myself. Whenever I balk due to lack of faith and get into worry and stuff, there's a part of me that feels shitty, like guilty, which doesn't serve. And I'm just gonna kind of share with you the process. I start to feel guilty, like, oh man, I'm not as spiritually developed as I thought I was, and this and that. And, well, those are usually when there are opportunities that are for spiritual growth. Now, that's kind of what your friends or folks that you've been chatting with seem to be at that point where it was like, okay, I can't judge whether or not they would have verbalized that. I'm afraid, my faith is waning. Things like that, I can just guess, you know. And I think the test of one's faith, and I'll keep this on myself again, is just stay committed to that process and just do it because that's what you're supposed to do, even in spite of how you feel.
Well, you know, the thing is, it's again, our being humans, we do these habitual things, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And if we get into the
change in a human being are like very, very difficult.
Right. But
seemingly. I mean, I should
yes,
say they
yes,
are.
seemingly. Because if you get into a state where you're consciously intent, and your conscious intent is to follow that positive path.
I mean, a lot of folks involved in any kind of, like, you know, you look at Martin Luther King, you look at Malcolm X, you look at many others. They have all had crises of faith.
Yes, but they keep going positively forward.
I think that one of our little, traps society likes to play with to keep people complacent and stuck in their fear and stuff.
Yep.
Is that's never really explained in depth, so that people can get sort of a spiritual insight or an education. That's by design. I mean, it's good. You put the man's face on a stamp, and you write again. It's the same parallel. You're reading the stories, you're looking at the pictures, and it kind of becomes like, well, that was that guy. That was so many years ago. It's a great story.
They create a narrative to their own needs rather than exemplifying what the person really was, because Martin Luther King, as an example, is stuck right on the steps in front of Lincoln Center when little white children and black children get together. But he went past that. He went on into the Poor People's March. He went on to call for the end of Vietnam. He came on to, and that's why he got whacked. Because, right. And they don't talk about any. I mean, he was in a city fighting for the garbage men's rights, So our friend left because why? Why did our friend just leave? And Jamie, got any insight? Here he's coming back. Oh, there he is. Sure, I took him up. Which one I love him. Holly, where'd you go?
I went I'm still here, but I came back.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Now, yeah, 5x5. It would sound like aliens were coming in your front door.
Right. Well, how's this sound now?
Sounds good.
All right.
Instead of the
All right,
sketchy.
good, because I'm trying the new device that I purchased because
So you're not in the subway now.
no, I have not been in the subway all day today.
Okay.
I went to a non-existent Bible study, went to the diner, had an omelet, drank coffee and cranberry juice. And now I'm in my abode, and I'm talking to you via a Bluetooth device that may be better than my previous Bluetooth device. So
Well, I think it is.
I'm testing it.
The last time we spoke, you were having what were you having?
I was having a conversation with you.
No, not just a few minutes ago, but a day or two ago.
I had a conversation with you then.
Well, what was that conversation about?
Trying to find a more sustainable spirituality to yeah, that's pretty much the crux of it.
So what was the blockage?
Well, I don't think you're talking about like diverticulitis.
No.
But we can have spiritual blockages that are probably just as painful, if not more.
Usually.
What was my spiritual blockage? Well, I guess it goes back to what I said before. I was concentrating on my limits rather than accepting them so that they don't become a limit and they become a gift.
Right.
So my inability to do that was causing me a blockage.
That is probably one of humanity's biggest problems.
Correct.
Because it is used by the status quo, powers that shouldn't be, to augment cultural, social, individual incarceration into the status quo.
Into slavery.
Yeah, into slavery. That's the status quo, slavery. Slavery is the status quo. And like
Correct.
I said, and that's what Martin Luther King was talking about. And that's why the narrative stops at the steps of the Washington Monument. And that's why it's really interesting, you go to look at anything that Malcolm X said. And Malcolm X was a much better speaker than Martin Luther King was. He close to 6 million people to become Muslim, and not all of them in jail. And we don't. The only thing we have is Alice Haley's autobiography of Malcolm X, and Malcolm didn't even write it. But what's truly interesting is the FBI has every recording of every speech he made, and this woman, I forget her name, she used a FOIA and got all of that, and she's written a number of great books about Malcolm X from what the FBI said. It was like truly amazing. The only people who really got a good history of Malcolm X is the FBI. So that is the dynamic. So he was never stuck, and he constantly went from being a super, Black power radical Muslim, saying by any means necessary. He went to the Hajj and saw not just Black people there, but white people and everybody else. And he came back and realized he had to not only get Black people to be Muslims, but he had to get white Christians to understand it and realize that being a true Christian was like being a Muslim. And that's when he got whacked. As long as he was like just Black power, he was okay. But to
kind of give the cliff notes to the audience,
right.
This is kind of, I'm offering this for that. I mean, and this is just a conclusion that I drew from that, what you talked about. You've talked about at great length. Divide and conquer is always the system's thing. That's their MO. That's when, so any spokesperson, activist, what have you, if they are still alive, they haven't crossed that path where
they become dangerous.
Unity is becoming more openly discussed and is the goal.
Right. And
so, if they're still alive, they're complicit with the system, or they just haven't crossed that line yet.
Yes.
And once that line is crossed, they are dead. So anybody who's ever wanted to bring about change leading towards unity of, to quote Malcolm, the human family, they'll be killed. So just peanut gallery, just tune into that, and you'll know what I'm talking about.
So
You'll see it.
I've been doing that my whole life, but early on, I didn't know I was doing that. It wasn't until I got to be about 14, and one of my mentors said, "You're the only guy I've ever seen who really speaks truth to power, and you don't even know you're doing it, and that's why you're so good at it, because you're not."
Well, I think that's the natural state of human beings should have,
right?
If they haven't been inculcated into the
So I didn't know it, and then I got hit like a ton of bricks, right? And murdered twice and just didn't die.
Yeah, you were knocked out of frame,
right?
And when somebody gets knocked out of frame, I'm on the phone.
Right.
When someone gets knocked out of frame, you see the mechanisms around.
Right. That eye I have over here, that's all it sees is out of frame.
So you see it,
when they make that illusion in films where they show you the sprockets in the movie you're watching, right? And maybe the film catches fire. That's my left eye. It does that all the time. But it got me to realize that to fulfill this, you don't have to go mano-y-mano. And the best thing to do is to navigate it and not fight it. To be the flow of love.
Well, like I said earlier, accept the limits until they are no longer limits.
Exactly. And then they don't kill you. And actually they start
if you do cross over the line or perceived as a threat, you will be murdered.
Oh yes.
That's just without saying. Well, a lot of you and I know this, but I don't necessarily know who's listening to the podcast. And that's not, and I hope, and I'm just being as sincere as I can be, I really hope that I'm not coming off like I'm trying to be some kind of a know-it-all or anything, because I don't want to turn folks off to that. And then plus, this is just lived experience. I'm not an academician. I don't have letters after my name. I'm not trying to promote a book. I'm not, this is just what I've been about for 53 years on the planet, 54 actually. So that's all I have. And it's cool. It's enough, more than enough for me. If somebody benefits from what I'm sharing, awesome. If not, well, that's cool too.
This
only care.
Taken in and fed into your spirit. And as your spirit is in co-creation with love, you are the decider on how you're going to do it, right? Not how we say to do it or anybody else tells you anything. It's you're the decider. And
well, it's more powerful if it's self-generated.
But that's why you had to put it into your internal love and process it and then have it.
Well, you got to know it. You want to know it, you got to live it. Right, exactly. You want to live it, you got to know it. Right. That's like, I love the word gnosis for that. It's experiential. Right. And I think one of the things I learned, which I'm really happy I understand this, and I put it into practice, not as often as I probably should, but when I do, the outcomes are great. It's personalize it.
Yeah.
Personalize the information that's coming into your consciousness. And that could be anything. That could be like, directions to the 7-Eleven, whatever it is. If you personalize it, it's yours and no one can take it away from you, except for you. If you choose to ignore it or not act on it or let it kind of atrophy.
That's one of the things that keeps us on the straight and narrow of our conscious intent and our conscious awareness, so we don't get knocked out. Being knocked out of the frame is not a bad thing, But being
It's
knocked,
an initial part of the journey, but
Right.
you want to kind of you want to build your own framework and not get knocked out of it. That's
yeah,
the
that's it. So if you, but that's the thing.
lead us not into temptation. You know.
Yep, exactly. So that is the motif. Is that it's okay to get knocked out of the perceived status
Yeah.
quo.
Well, that's because the status quo is a prison.
Right.
It's a mental, physical, and spiritual prison. But you don't understand that. And listen, some days I want to get reinserted back into the matrix. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
You know, I'll be like, oh man, this is too hard. But you know, coal isn't made into a diamond because you tickle it with a feather. You know, this, sorry, But then again, my attitude, this is my refrain, is accept the limits until they're no longer limits.
Right.
Because then you don't wind up playing, at least for me, I don't wind up playing a victim role. You're like, oh, I was born under a bad sign. I was blah, 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 on and on and on. And then days and years and time just passes. And, and that to me, even though it's mental activity, it is the equivalent of doing nothing. But however, well, maybe not. It's you're torturing yourself, and hopefully out of that suffering, you will be saved. And that's not from an external force. That's from and that's what really Christ was talking about.
Yes,
at least in my view.
It's like, and that's why all these movies with the superhero and all that stuff is again part of that programming. You can't wait for the hero. And that's what
you are the hero. You are the.
That's what Joseph Campbell was talking.
You're the savior. Absolutely. And he said it in a way that he didn't get killed.
Right,
exactly. So as far as we know.
Yeah.
Most of these things that we're talking about, they're, well, not most, all. They're universal. Yes. They're just said in different ways. We say them a little differently, and the hope is that, however we're presenting it, it'll click with somebody. Or maybe they might read something else and say, hey, that sounded like what those guys were talking about. Maybe I should really investigate this. Maybe I should stay open.
Did you ever read any of Thomas Merton's stuff?
I have some. I have read only really wonderful one-man play. And you want somebody putting what they've been reading and learning into their personal experience. This play that I saw, I think it was called Thomas and Me, I think it was called. And it was about this fellow who was a struggling actor, and it's a one-man show. And how he, through Merton's teachings, kind of became integrated and started to live a more peaceful life.
Did you?
And it was, and not only did he change his life, he made it into a play to show other people how that could transpire. So yeah, I'm familiar with Merton.
So where was just a little ancillary? What theater? What neighborhood? And what?
This was in Jackson Heights, Queens. I think it was about maybe a year ago. Yeah, it was a year ago. Jackson Heights, Queens, and this fella goes on the road with this. If you could, maybe bear with me, I can struggle with the computer to find the website. Do you have the chat going too?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I can link it to the chat. So, but we can talk about other things. I don't want to have too much dead air.
The thing about Merton is that so he started writing in a way. And he was a Methodist, and then he became a Catholic priest because he was smitten with my mother, and she blew him off saying, oh, I can't date you. You're not even a Catholic. So he went and did that and then fell into being, he loved Jesus. He loved that whole scene. And then he took it past what everyone thought Catholicism was, and was trying to integrate it with Eastern teachings and everything else under the sun. And his books, like No Man's an Island, came out just at the perfect time in the late 50s to really hit. And the Catholic Church loved it because they were making millions. So they said, Tommy, just keep going. They let him do whatever the heck he wanted until he went to he had gone to the East a number of times, but he was going to make a connection with Tibet and the Catholic Church, and he got murdered in Tibet in a hotel, and he was in he's in a bathtub, and they didn't have central heating; they had electric heating, and the heater fell into the bathtub, right? And it was obviously he was murdered because the guys who had the hotel were smart enough to not have a long cord, meaning it would be impossible to get that electric heater to fall in the bathtub if it didn't have an extension cord. And it had an extension cord. So he was murdered for where he was. They had, we love your books, we're making a lot of money, just keep writing the same old crap and we'll let you do whatever you want. But if you're going this way, you better watch out. And he kept going that way and he got murdered. So he is a prime example of the latter. He died in the 60s, give or take. And
right, and he had activity with the civil rights movement.
right.
And not only did he have contact with that, his personal spiritual awakening and what he, and it's being taught now. In fact, Christian centering prayer, which is what I'm involved with, a group that does that. The whole Christian contemplative movement, it all springs from Merton.
Right.
And so, he was powerful on not only the spiritual front, but also in the material realm.
Right.
So when you overlap that, then they'll kill you. Yeah. But that didn't stop Jesus or Obi-Wan Kenobi for that matter. So,
And so
and it won't stop us, and it won't stop anyone, But it's part of the greater whole. Is just you just kind of go with it, man.
You do
you learn your purpose, and you live. And
I'm
not saying run outside and martyr yourself or something, but if that so happens, then I guess that's, we know the story behind that. And
but the thing is, the real safety net and the real powerful tool is your egoless ego. I mean, if you're living in a human body, you have an ego, but you don't
or enlightened self-interest.
But you don't have to live your ego.
Yeah, I like the term enlightened self-interest.
Yes, that's a good one.
Which is really cool. Yeah. Because a lot of folks, kind of go into the misconception that it's like, oh, they're enlightened. You got to be, like how St. Francis is depicted. All the little animals are coming up to him. He sent them little birds and stuff. It's beautiful. It's a nice image. But, sure, in his day, he ate 3 meals a day or whatever he needed to eat to sustain himself. And, I'm sure he, avoided people, places, and things that might cause him physical destruction. So it's not like people think because maybe they're awake, and I'm using that in a
woke
sense. What did I call that? It's
yeah, you had a good term for that.
A lucid coma. And God bless them. They're God's kids too. But no, not woke. That all of a sudden you're sort of impervious to the your physical demise, which is not true. So you should have an enlightened self-interest, and part of that is in being kind and being of service to others, is also being kind and being of service to oneself. And there's times where it's, what, got a lot on my plate today, man. Give me a call some other time.
Well,
simple as that.
When someone bumps into you and is nasty and rotten, and what they're really doing is asking for help to get out of that, right? And so I always go to that and say, okay, sure, let's do this. And the deeper I get into trying helping them, the more obnoxious and mean they get, right? And then I say, so you're a Christian, aren't you? Oh, yes. So hold my hand and let's say the Lord's Prayer. And I grab their hands and start doing it. It's like an electric shock. And the devil that's making them be nasty is like getting barbecued inside them, and they run away, right? They break the circuit and run away. And what that is part of it is me, my cheeky monkey self, knowing that this is going to happen. The other side of the coin is and I say this all the time when I'm in fellowship in these churches, and I go, listen, you guys, you're constantly talking about the devil is like testing you, blah blah. No, everything we do wrong, we do. The devil didn't make me do this stupid thing. I did, right? And if you read the Bible, Jesus is just saying, wake up, kids, and be aware of what you're doing. And I'm being a good example. You don't have to be me, but just try and be your best self. That's really all that Jesus is asking, and God is
Mm.
asking. And but it isn't the devil that's doing this. It's what we live on this planet Earth has been before we got here. It was either a frozen ice ball or a swampy yuck. And then we have been living since our presence here, a million or plus years. Um, this is a Goldilocks period. This is the Garden of Eden. We're in it. And if it's turning into hell, we're turning it into hell. The devil isn't. So that is the real issue of the difference between religion and theology. Theology is that quest to understand how to be the child of God.
Mm. Well, I'm drinking a combination of Metamucil, Green Vibrance, and vitamin C, all at once.
All in one glass?
All in one pint glass, with water, of course. It's my daily thing. I was supposed to drink this a few hours ago, but I forgot.
So does it have like different levels?
No, just don't want to use 3 glasses. I'm too lazy.
So you mixed it up, and it's all kind of a what is its major color? Pink, green.
Unfortunately, it's like swamp green.
Swamp green.
It's like swamp things fucking jizz. I've aroused this fucking swamp. And now I'm gonna swallow it. Better to swallow this than to swallow what the system gives you. All right, here we go, kids. Let's enjoy, shall we? It's not so bad, actually. The Metamucil and the vitamin C kind of counteracts the green stuff. That's like and it's good digestion, and
Yep.
My wife just bought a bunch of bananas.
Oh, that'll work. I had bananas for breakfast. I cooked them up.
Yeah.
And with hot sauce and raisins.
Nice. Have you ever had living in New York City? I'm sure at one point you had plantanos, right?
Right. Oh yeah. I lived in a lot of Hispanic neighborhoods. Yeah.
Also known as the Puerto Rican banana.
Yep. But they're meant to be cooked. You don't want
to eat them. Yeah, you don't eat them. You don't eat them raw. I mean, you can. I mean, do whatever you want. But it's traditionally they're cooked, fried. I think. Fried plantanos.
Mr. Tucci Fritos, and he had the best Cubano sandwich and the best Cubano coffee and the best cooked.
I love Cuban sandwiches. They're great. They're the best. I'm not a fan of what do they put on it? The cucumber or the big pickle that they put on it. I like pickles and stuff, but I don't like it on the sandwich. But I prefer that pressed pork and
the cheese.
And the cheese is pretty good. I don't even really like it with the cheese, to be honest with you. If the pork is cooked well enough and seasoned well enough, I don't necessarily need it. I was a good boy today when I had my omelets. I prefer hash browns, but hash browns are not big in New York City. Home fries are the thing here. But I prefer hash browns.
Home fries are the chunky guys,
right? Yeah. Whereas the hash brown is more of like a potato patty.
They put it through a shredder.
And French fries. I got my wife a few years back turned me on to this very horrible habit of getting French fries with the eggs for breakfast, and
Well, you
I
cannot beat a
enjoy.
French
I
fry.
overindulged in that.
If
So
a French fry is cooked correctly, it is the food of the gods.
no, I love French fries, but a little too much. But I'm moving away from bad eating habits, which is good. And tomorrow I'm going to join a gym, which I've been. And now that I've said it on air, I might actually have to fucking be held accountable for that. I'm reading Jamie's comments. Jamie Hiller Rubis. I'm assuming that's his full real name.
Might be.
And he said something about. Okay, it's kind of. What did he say? Stupa gifts. I don't know what that means.
Is that in the middle of his
Jamie, could you clarify? Yeah, it was probably when we were talking earlier, and he was referring to it, but I didn't have the computer on in front of me. Yeah, Jamie, if you're still listening,
I think he's
in what context did I say stupa? And then he kind of called me out because I sometimes mess with people. He said, no, Rubis is red ink sovereign. So I'm not sure what that actually means. I believe he means that is a name he created for himself. But Jamie, and just asking, what's stupa gifts? Is that just like my bad New York accent or something?
No, Yiddish. He's talking about it's a comment in Yiddish.
It is?
Yeah. That's why I think it is. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm asking. Right. I'm trying to interact with the audience.
Right.
So that, like, you write your name in red ink. Okay. I don't have any red ink.
Right. Well, that's what he's. I think he's talking about, like our country, our Constitution is really superseded by stuff like admiralty law. You go into a court, there's the American flag, and then there is the American flag with a golden fringe around it. You ever see an American flag with a golden fringe around it?
No.
You never did?
No, I stay away from flags. They're dangerous.
Right, they are. But anyway, that represents admiralty law, which was came from the Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. And that red ink was all the contracts were always signed in that. So it meant, God, bing, it superseded everything, even kings. That's why the word F-U-C-K means fornicate under church and king, meaning getting screwed by the church and king. So
okay,
what is James saying here? Martin, what's the rest?
No, I asked him what stupa was, but he said it sounded like I said stupa. So I'm trying to get him to recount the context.
See what he just said? Exactly right.
Yeah. Cool.
That's what I thought he was talking about. Yep,
sounds important.
Well, it's a definition of, again, the powers that shouldn't be. The status quo, which is prison.
So he's saying that his name is in red ink because he's personally sovereign, or he's sovereign unto the government.
I don't know which is I don't think it's either. But which are you, James? Sovereign?
I don't think he's sovereign with the government. Well, you can't be sovereign with the government, so I misspoke.
We can be.
And he said, "Don't remember the context." I said, "Well, neither do I." Separates you from legalities. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Thanks. Appreciate that. Now, do you pronounce it Jaime or do you pronounce it Jamie? No, because some people do. It's Jaime. I don't know. I mean, first, I didn't have my glasses on. I thought his name was Jamie Hitler. You know. How old are you, Jamie?
I think he's in his 50s.
Oh, good. No, I thought you was just cantankerous. We
Yeah,
are.
that's it. Corporation.
Flesh and blood man, not a corporation.
Right.
Well, I hope you have many stupa gifts.
Yeah.
Not that you or I even know what that word means,
Right,
but I'm going to keep saying it.
Right. Well, you know what? I'll tell you what it means.
Or I can play the show back and listen.
I'll tell you what. Well, you can do that. That's the beauty of the show. And most people.
I'm going to be
most people
62
watch
on the
show as
18th.
wallpaper.
Right.
You know. But I'll tell you the stupid thing. Oh, when I was in the 10 years of of the corporate desperate lawyers, we went to a lot of high-end titty bars, right? In Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that neck of the woods. And there was this one girl who was top notch, right? She was the star. And
Top notch at being topless.
well, she came on totally naked all the time. And you know, when the guys.
Well, it is very warm in Florida, so I don't blame
And
her.
so when she would first be on stage before she'd take the boys into the VIP room, the thing she did was she would get on her butt and she would put her legs on the thing. You know, there's like this little, you know, there's the stage, and then down a foot is this thing that goes all around the stage where the men put their cocktails and they're sitting in these fancy seats. And
The cocks?
she would put her feet on that table and then put her legs around their heads and squeeze their face into her crotch until they were unconscious. And you know, when you have sex and you strangle each other and you have that like hallucinogenic, dreamy thing go on. Anyway,
Okay.
that was her specialty. So we got to be buddies, and you know, she liked me.
So she would strangle the customers.
Yeah, she strangled right there in front of everybody. And what she did in the VIP room was like, woo! But anyway, we got to know each other, and she really liked me.
Erotic asphyxiation.
And she used to say that I was stupa because she was from Eastern Europe, and she was Roman, Jewish, and about 5 other, whatever religion paid the most money at the time. That's what she was when she was in Europe. And so she used to call me stupa smart. And that's exactly what Jamie was kind of talking about. Meaning I had all these strange insights in my head, and she was she was brought up to be like a Mata Hari spy girl for the Russians. So she was really highly educated. But here she found herself making a fortune, strangling, middle-aged, middle managers in titty bars.
Right. How old is Fish?
Oh, how old is Fish? In her 40s. I really don't know, but she's not, she's probably in her 40s.
Oh, Fish is okay. Right. Or identifies as a female, sorry.
One of the cadre.
Excuse me.
That's who Fish is.
Cadre, good.
The cadre.
Oh, okay. Well, then I apologize. I will use the proper terminology.
Yeah, use the proper terminology. They are the cadre.
Cadre. That's good.
Right.
They're down, yo.
Yeah, they're down, yo. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, they know what's up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's good. Well, I had her on one time. I was listening to the show.
Lana?
I don't remember the name. I'm just going to describe some of the stuff.
Let's see if we can get on the show, too.
Well, she was me people, and it's been a whole process.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
I mean, I'm generalizing like badly, but
yeah, she used to be here. Not so much we were.
I think you should. I mean, just a suggestion, Mr. Owl, and of course, this is ultimately your decision. It's your show. I would think it would probably behoove you in your descriptions as to maybe put the name or moniker of the people that you've had on that show. You can do it after and when you edit the program. Okay. And then that way, as a reference, you'd be able to find it. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'm such a lazy scuzz that I whatchamacallit, Never. I just kind of end the show. I hit the bottom one. I hit the one up here, and then I go out of it. I never go down into the editing thingamajig because every time I try, I do something stupid like, push the wrong button. I have no idea.
Well, if I may ask, I'm not saying I'm going to do this because I'm also a lazy son of a bitch too.
Right.
However, if you gave me access, I could do stuff like that for you.
Okay. Well,
So we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there.
Off show.
Yeah.
See.
That may facilitate things. I was really hoping that, unfortunately things didn't work out because, well, then again, John was involved, so that's usually part of the equation. Well, did I just say that? Yeah, I did. The Staten Island thing didn't work out because I was really looking forward to kind of helping you along with some stuff. However, that may happen again. You never know, or I may be headed in your direction.
Right. And that's where I'm really letting go of everything and letting God.
You gotta let go of everything.
Yeah.
The more I wake up to that, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even today, I was a little annoyed with the Bible study class that wasn't there, but I was like, well, who gives a shit? You'll find something else. And I did. You called me, so there you go.
So the phone ringing is Lana.
Oh, she's going to come on too? We're going to have a three-way or?
No, yeah, right. Exactly on my other device.
Okay. And Fish says I am a girl. Okay, cool. All right, cool.
Fish is
I am a boy.
She's been around on the cadre a long time. She has a interesting story. And
how old is Fish?
I don't know.
How old are you?
Yeah, Fish can tell us if she wishes to.
Well, this is my sort of impromptu survey of the age of listeners. So
well, I would
that
say
way,
the average age is in the 40s. There are some younger ones, but pretty much I would say that's so.
I think most people of course, this isn't true of everybody. There's always exceptions, but
I got
late 30s, late 40s.
Hold on, handsome. Hey, everyone, I'm almost out of battery on the show, so I'm getting out of the show right now so it doesn't crash. Love you guys.
Okay.
Speak to you. You stay there, buddy. But everybody else, I'm gonna talk to you later. Okay.
All right. Have a good.